When you try your best but you don't succeed. When you get what you want but not what you need. When you feel so tired but you can't sleep. Stuck in reverse.
Welcome to Book Time with Ryan. I'm Ryan, and today I'm going to be talking about All the Worst Humans by Phil Elwood. How I Made News for Dictators, Tycoons, and Politicians. It's going to be a different kind of review, I think, today, because I am going to give you a little bit of information about myself, but also my feel for the book as a book, and my feel for the content in the book, which is a little different. And you'll kind of figure out why, I think, in a few minutes. Just as a little bit of background, I have been doing public relations, public affairs work for nearly 20 years. I've done some of that for the federal government, some of that for nonprofits, some of that for a boutique PR firm that had a contract with the federal government. I have a master's degree in strategic public relations and just an interest in it. I also went to the Defense Information School, which is the Department of Defense's school for public affairs. All different levels of public affairs, but including public affairs officers. And I was a public affairs officer in the Coast Guard, on a ship as a collateral duty public affairs officer, and then as a public affairs staff officer at headquarters. I'd say that just so you understand that I do have some opinions, some of them strong, about public relations, public affairs. And I'm going to use those interchangeably for this video. I have opinions on techniques and tools, and also on the way some people use public relations. And that's where I think I'm going to diverge from my feelings of the book and then the way that Phil Elwood has practiced public relations according to his book. Because there are certainly different degrees of intensity in the public relations community, and there's a darker side to some parts of it, which I think a lot of people in public relations know, and they don't all dabble in that. Most people don't, and not everyone's good at it, and not everyone's great at it, but there are different ways that people engage in public relations, whether it's for themselves, for an organization they represent, or for a contract they're on. All right. I also live in the Washington, D.C. area. I've lived here and I'm talking about the area around D.C. because I don't want to live in D.C. A little over 15 years. Okay. There. So that's my background-ish. Phil Elwood is probably maybe 5 years older than me, around there ish. And this book is the story of his life in public relations up to this point. He didn't start in public relations. So he came to DC. He had a troubled early youth, went to Pitt, got kicked out of Pitt, or got kicked out of Pitt, resigned, disenrolled from Pitt, from the University of Pittsburgh for, he was working in a Mexican restaurant in Pittsburgh and got hooked on cocaine. That's pretty extreme. And his classes, he tanked his classes and disenrolled. So he went back to Washington State, Oregon. I forget if he's in Oregon, but flew to Tacoma. I finished this yesterday. So anyway, he flies back to the West Coast for his parents, and they're unhappy with it, and he's depressed, and he just kind of trying to figure out what to do with his life. And his friend recommends that he go to Washington, D.C. to be an intern on the Hill for a senator. And that's what he does. He goes and becomes an intern for Senator Moynihan and experiences the intern life. Now, this is one of those inside DC things, I think, that annoyed me more than it would annoy a lot of readers. If you are in DC, you will run into interns or kind of low-level hill staffers. I don't try to get to the hill often. It's just a different animal, and it's not one I'm attracted to. But sometimes you'll be on the train and you'll hear these staffers, especially interns, talking about these amazing experiences that they had. And a lot of it's about access and who they saw talking to who and what they were saying. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And it's a lot of it's garbage. I mean, it's cool for an intern, right? But they're not driving policy. They're helping in various ways. But the way you hear some talk about it on a metro train, it seems like they're right there and they're big players, and they're not. That's kind of the feeling I got, and I don't know if Phil Elwood was doing it in a way to... There were points where I think he kind of allowed for the fact that he didn't have a huge role, but the way he was talking about also felt like those metro rides. Oh, he's rubbing shoulders with Senator Fred Thompson from Tennessee. Do you think Fred Thompson remembers? Well, Fred Thompson's dead, but do you think he remembers that? Probably not. He probably doesn't consider I'm rubbing shoulders with Phil Elwood. It's such a big difference between the intern and the senator that senators feel the need to, talk to the intern and make them feel good, take them under their wing a little bit. I get it. You see it in any organization, especially with junior people. It's like, hey, let me help shape your future, kind of thing. All right, so he's doing that. At some point, he's drinking a lot. There's a lot of drinking in this book. And let me just say this. Don't. I don't know if he's ever admitted that there's a drinking problem, but a vast majority of the social interaction in this book is him drinking or being drunk. And that's going to become a problem. That's just a problem. That could be a problem that's, I don't know, indicating there's bigger problems of substance abuse. Maybe. But if I had any recommendations that have nothing to do with public relations, it is, dude, get some help. Stop drinking. Get help. Because it seems like, based on what I read, you have a serious alcohol problem. He applies to George Washington University, where I got my master's degree. And I guess he gets in an accident at Gelman Library, and he runs his car into a window, or he runs through a window. Something happens with the window, and he's not welcome on the campus anymore. And that's right in the middle of the city. It's Foggy Bottom. The people he's working for, they still think that he needs to apply somewhere. So he applies to Georgetown, and he gets a nice letter from Carl Levin, and he gets in. It's almost like he failed up. He actually says that he fails up. His future wife says that he's the Forrest Gump of DC. He somehow fails but advances through his failure, which is a nice problem to have. Well, he has some input into what's being said about issues, and he uses that to get a job at a firm, PR firm. He finds that he likes and that he wants to pursue the role of shaping history from behind the curtain, which I get. There is, I think, some degree of excitement being behind the scenes and helping things be communicated. Eventually, he goes to a PR firm, and there he's going to represent a different foreign interests, and that may be Gaddafi, or maybe the president of Syria, Bala al-Assad. I can't say his name. it's kind of the thank you for smoking clientele. That's kind of what you got to think about. Like, and he even liked that book. I don't know if he liked the book. He liked the movie. I liked the book. He liked the movie or the book. I've done a review on the book. I like the book, and I did a comparison of the movie and the book. So check that out. I think maybe one of the differences is after I read that book, I wasn't a fan of the main character. There were interesting moments. I think there's a lot of truth to some of the depictions, and Christopher Buckley would know. I came away from it thinking that you are who you surround yourself with, and if you represent bad people and you do a good job at it, that's not necessarily something to be proud of. It's good to do a good job. If you're doing a good job with a bad outcome for society, don't do that job. You don't deserve to have your acts papered over because you don't like the consequences. And I don't have a lot of respect for people who think that you should. It's not something you don't deserve it. Phil has this experience where he's dealing with Gaddafi's son in Las Vegas and is worried about what he's doing. He also kind of has this revelation that the people he's working with or for kill their own people. That's not a good thing. He wants to get paid for stuff, but I think, to me, it looks like he's willing to ignore the negative sides of what he's doing, and he's supposed to be a smart guy. He's complicated. It's like there's not a huge leap from this is a dictator to they're doing dictator things and harming their own people. It should not take a report to help you realize that, especially if you're doing any kind of research. This is not new for any of these dictators. So I didn't really feel like it was genuine to be like, well, you can get anything for a certain amount of money. And that may be true. You may be able to get anything for enough money. That does not mean that you have to be the one providing it. And that's what you have to do. At the end of the day, you got to look in the mirror and say, is this who I want to be? There was some of that. I felt like it was too late in a lot of ways. And I don't know if it was just desire to look better in the end. Like, he got fired. And then he's like, oh, we're doing the wrong thing. That's a much easier statement to make once you've been fired. You want to be able to have that kind of thought process while you're there or before you start working there. I had an issue with that. You're working for the bad guys. And really, like, you can't play dumb with a lot of this stuff. There's stuff in here about how he's working for Mossad agents from Israel, and he's laundering money through his accounts for them, and he's holding on to a computer and doesn't ask what it's for. And that's one of those, like, I just don't want to know. Ooh, I'm just gonna, like, what the fuck? You don't know? That's not normal. You know it's not normal. You just hope it doesn't catch up to you. And then when it does, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't know. It just didn't feel right. But come on. 5 seconds of thinking about it will let you know there's something wrong here. You can deny it. Oh, I had no idea. But I don't buy it. But what am I? I'm just reading it. I'm just reading the book. I'm not privy to all the information. Just what's presented. All right, so, I kind of went into it thinking, is there going to be public relations stuff in here? There is. And you know what? It's legit. The concepts that he talks about, the considerations, the scenarios, kind of on the record, off the record, on background, not for attribution, the stuff he talks about with placements and contacts and relationships with reporters and providing the truth and burning bridges. Those are all true things that I had no problem with a lot of the concepts. I had issues with some of the ways he used the concepts. I didn't think they were necessarily to good ends, but he used them. Now I think like there are times in here where he may believe that some of the stuff he did had more of an impact than it did. One placement. There's times where it's like I'm rolling in it. I'm destroying it. And then in the next paragraph, you find out that he reached out to 60 people and one got back to him. Now that's good. One gets back to you. But in some parts of this book, you feel like he's hitting home runs all the time, and he's not all the time. I mean, he got fired a couple times. He quit a couple times. Short stays in a couple areas. But I'm sure he's good at it. I'm sure he's had successes. So the public relations side of it, I think the concepts when you're reading it, and he talks about really the mechanics of certain things, even preparing your subject matter experts for interviews and having them repeat certain lines that you want to provide, kind of the command message, the messaging that you want to provide, how to bridge from a conversation or a question that you don't like to an answer that you want to provide, and how you do that. You give the answers to the questions you want, not the questions you get. There's ways to transition from a question that is not great to a way to frame it for a message that you want to provide, and provide multiple times to really drill home. And he talks about not repeating bad things because that's the sound bite. All that stuff, agree with 100%. It's sound. It's tried. It's true. Totally agree with it. And you know what? The book is entertaining. I read this in a day or two. It was just great. Being in DC and even some of the names in here, I recognize some of the, not even just the big PR firms. I mean, those are recognizable and they have different reputations, but even the smaller ones, I interviewed at one of them and they had a bad reputation. I didn't ask for the interview. I was getting out of the Coast Guard. Someone wanted me to go and interview there. Basically turned into a, hey, what contacts do you have with the oil business? And besides dealing with the BP Deepwater Horizon spill cleanup, none. And that was it. It was the most clear-cut, did not get the job interview I've ever had. And it was even more awkward because I didn't request it. So he's like, I don't know why you're here. I was like, I didn't ask to be here. I came. I'm transitioning from the military, but I didn't seek you out. I was asked to come by your VP, or your senior VP, or executive VP, or whatever. That firm did not have a great reputation. They had a kind of a bulldog reputation of doing some pretty questionable fringe things, which I think a lot of what Phil Elwood talks about in here is things that he's done. There's some very up-to-date stuff in here, some very recent things. I was watching the news yesterday, and there's stuff in the news about a firm from Tennessee that was providing right-wing influencers with talking points from Russia, funded by Russia. For anybody who's been in the United States for the last 40 years, generally Russia's been the enemy. There's been this weird kind of turn in the last couple of years where suddenly some people are saying, oh, Russia's our friend. They're not. And if you look at the talking points that some of these people were saying, it's very clear that it's pro-Russia. How that happened, I wonder. So it was interesting to watch that on TV and finish this book, because you could definitely see a lot of the same threads between what Phil did and what Tenet in Tennessee was doing. And and I'm sure there's some very, very similar experiences. So it's timely, it's relevant, well written. I don't know if it was ghost written. There's this line. I always read the acknowledgments, and there's this line at the very end where he says, "Finally, I want to thank Kai Flanders. It was so much fun showing you this world of mayhem. Thank you for helping me communicate." It's like, who is Kai Flanders? It was just kind of this random blurb, and I looked him up, and it seems like he's a ghostwriter. So I don't know if this was ghostwritten or not. The writing is entertaining. It's engaging. It's engaging for reasons sometimes that should make you angry, but it's engaging. And the subject matter is relevant, and it's current, pretty much. The public relations concepts, I think, are solid. Not necessarily always used in a good way, but they're solid. And the experiences, I have no doubt, are real in some way, and are at least reminiscent of other DC experiences and programs and approaches to public relations. Not mine. We find out eventually Phil has, he's bipolar. He has manic and depressive cycles. I think he's self-medicating. There's this one point where he's getting ketamine injections from a doctor, and the doctor says that the ketamine industry has a bad reputation as a recreational drug, but it also really helps with reducing suicidal ideations, because Phil tries to commit suicide. No, he stops short of committing suicide, but he's very close, and he goes to counseling, which is good. But he starts having ketamine treatments because the other drugs aren't working, and he likes it because it gives him a legal high. Which, okay, let's not get too excited about the highs. That's another issue you may need to look into. But the doctor brings up how the ketamine industry has this bad reputation, and Phil feels the need to help with that, and the doctor is okay with that. And then Phil comes in later, and he has trouble getting an appointment because there's this huge interest in this kind of therapy. And I'm not sure ethically if that's a good thing for a doctor to do. Like, you're treating somebody for depression, you kind of have an idea of what their background is. You're treating them with this drug, and then you're trying to kind of use them, or at least not say, like, there should be more division between what you're doing and what I'm asking you to do and what I'm providing. You shouldn't get pro bono public relations help from a patient. It just made me a little uncomfortable. I thought that was something the doctor probably should have avoided. I can't fault Phil. Phil's just the patient. But I think Phil's a complicated character. He's a real person. I have some common connections with him on LinkedIn. I asked one person about that, and they were like, I don't know who he is. But I definitely know somebody who's in the book, who's named in the book, and that was interesting. Kind of made me feel like an DC insider, having some overlap, but I haven't worked with him. I think Phil knows what he's doing. I think he's done it for bad guys, and I think you can't run from that. I don't want to be too hard on, well, I'm not sure if it's fair to be too hard on Phil when reviewing a book, because he really lays out a lot of it out there, or at least what he wants us to see. But there are times where it feels he's a little too proud of what he's doing, and maybe his revelation that it's wrong isn't as solid or complete as you'd like. I think he has some unaddressed issues. I think he's an alcoholic, based on what I've read. Just the amount of alcohol use and how often he was drunk or not functioning correctly. I get that some environments kind of force that on you, but I'm hoping that's been addressed and he's work that out a little bit more, like some of the drug use stuff. If you are in public relations, or if you're interested in communications, if you're interested in some of the way comms are done in the DC area, I think you'd enjoy this book. I enjoyed it. I gave it 3 stars. I think I'm going to revise that to 4 stars because I feel like that 3 stars is probably because of my annoyance in some of the techniques. It's not necessarily because of the writing or the actual book. It's more of like this personal problem I had with what he did in some ways, and I'm not sure if that really should bleed in as much into my grading. So I'm going to revise my score and give it a 4. It's good. It was entertaining, and I think you would enjoy it. It's funny if you're willing to kind of overlook some of the damaging bad things. I think I'm a buzzkill sometimes with that stuff. Like, I watched Wolf of Wall Street, and I didn't come away thinking like, wow, that Leo kid, he's really doing the cool thing here. I was like, what an asshole. Not what an asshole, but it looks like it's fun. Just what an asshole. I didn't get that what an asshole feel with Phil. I couldn't just laugh away some of the stuff he was doing. Is that harsh? Maybe. But it is what it is. So thanks for being here today. Again, all the worst humans. There are other worse humans out there. So it's not all of them, but he dealt with high profile bad humans. So thanks for being here today. I'm picking a song that Phil mentions in his book when he's getting his ketamine fix at the doctor's office. Fix You by Coldplay should be in here. If it's not, it's because it was blocked somehow. Either way, I don't get a revenue stream. I don't get any revenue, but if I did, it would be going to somebody else, not to me. Probably to Coldplay. So, all right, have a good one. Bye.
Lights will